Flooding and landslides continue to hit China, while areas hit by flooding months ago are still suffering. College students screaming for half an hour during the night after being locked down on campus for a month due to the epidemic. A real estate tycoon and party princeling was sentenced to 18 years in prison for calling party leader Xi Jinping a clown. A newly published video from China's military seems to have taken a few cues from Hollywood in its production. And a New York police officer originally from Tibet was arrested on charges of spying for China. He's accused of feeding intelligence on the Tibetan community in New York to the Chinese consulate. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. First, we turn to regions in China worst hit by flooding. Inside China's southern Guangxi province, a dam in Guilin City collapsed overnight on Saturday. The area was quickly flooded. In some places, the water completely submerged the ground floor of houses and other buildings. At the time, many locals hadn't woken up yet and were trapped inside their homes by the rising water. Meanwhile, in southwestern China, a landslide struck the region's G5 Jinkun Highway in Sichuan province. The incident destroyed part of a highway bridge. And in China's southeast, Anhui province stands as one of the country's worst hit by flooding. That's after local authorities opened several dams in the area around 2 months ago, allowing built-up floodwater to run off there. The decision was made to redirect the flooding away from wealthier, more developed areas nearby. Most of the floodwater has since receded, but it's still present in some areas. There are still residents waiting to go home and inspect the damages. A video shot last week shows some locals who were able to go home, but were met with severe destruction. Marks on one wall indicate that water rose to nearly the ceiling in this building back when a nearby dam was opened. And just outside, the street is still partially submerged. Locals report that the stagnant water in the street smells terrible. They say they don't understand why it hasn't drained away by now, 2 months after the flooding struck. Authorities have reportedly offered little to no insight on when things will return to normal. Some roads are passable again, but those at lower elevations are still underwater. The area's crops and agriculture have been largely ruined, and some people's houses are still flooded. Now for an update on another disaster, China's virus situation. Throughout August and September, China's northwestern Shaanxi province reported few to no new cases of the CCP or Chinese Communist Party virus each day. But despite the low infection rate, students from many colleges still aren't allowed to leave their dorm rooms. A video showing students collectively screaming from their windows has gone viral online. On Sunday night, students from Xi'an International Studies University shouted from inside their dorm rooms for nearly 30 minutes, protesting the school's closure amid the pandemic. The university reportedly didn't provide students with any additional support, like essential items and facilities. One student told us they've been under lockdown in their dorms since the end of August. They explained that the only supermarket on campus was shut down for selling expired items. So the students' only option is to order delivery. Deliveries are only accepted at the front gate of the campus, causing large crowds at meal times when students gather to pick up their food. Another student told us that the price of food in the school's cafeteria skyrocketed, sometimes costing 2 or 3 times more than normal. But it appears the school isn't taking students' complaints seriously. Following the students' 30-minute outburst, the university stated that it would simplify procedures for students to leave campus, add temporary supermarkets, and improve logistics support. The students' unusual protest isn't the first of its kind. Back in February, residents stuck in Wuhan, the epicenter of the pandemic, were trapped inside their homes for a month. In protest, they also began crying out together at night for help. A congressional report says the Chinese Communist Party and World Health Organization could have prevented the global pandemic if they had not covered up the early stages of the outbreak. According to the 90-page report, it is beyond doubt that the CCP actively engaged in a cover-up designed to obfuscate data, hide relevant public health information, and suppress doctors and journalists who attempted to warn the world. The report cited a study on medRxiv saying it is highly likely the ongoing pandemic could have been prevented. Adding, research shows the CCP could have reduced the number of cases in China by up to 95%. The report also stated that the WHO failed to investigate questions and warnings from Taiwan and Hong Kong about potential human-to-human transmission, while instead it praised the CCP for their apparent transparency. An infographic by our sister media, the Epoch Times, gives a look at Beijing's response and cover-up in the early stages of the virus outbreak. As far back as November 17th last year, the South China Morning Post reported the first infected person, citing government documents. On December 1st, the earliest documented patient was infected. According to a January 29th study, the first evidence of human-to-human transmission was in mid-December. On December 27th, a Chinese lab sequenced most of the virus genome. By the end of last year, China officially informed the public about cases of a viral pneumonia. Taiwan sent an email to the WHO pointing out signs of human-to-human transmission and asking for more information. It later says the WHO ignored its request. Now we enter this year. On January 2nd, a Wuhan virology lab obtains the full virus genome. This info is not made public for over a week. The next day, leaked documents show China's National Health Commission told regional health commissions to increase precautions against a major outbreak of infectious diseases. January 11th, China made the genome of the virus public. January 14th, the Associated Press says internal documents show Chinese officials determined they are likely facing a pandemic, but don't inform the public. The next day, January 15th, Chinese officials say publicly the risk of human-to-human infection is low. This, while an internal document obtained by the Epoch Times shows health officials knew and were preparing for human-to-human transmission. On January 18th, Wuhan allowed 40,000 families to gather to celebrate the Lunar New Year. 2 days later, January 20th, China officially confirms that there is human-to-human transmission. On January 23rd, Wuhan imposed a lockdown. By then, around 5 million people had already left the city for destinations around the world. January 27th, Wuhan's mayor admitted disclosure of the outbreak were not timely. He blamed the central government. By the end of January, on the 30th, the WHO declared the outbreak a global health emergency while praising China's response to the outbreak. On March 13th, the University of Southampton releases a study that says if China had responded to the outbreak 3 weeks earlier than it did, COVID-19 cases could have been reduced by 95%. In early May, international pressure begins building as more countries call for inquiries into the origins of the virus. China sentenced a former property tycoon and the son of a high-ranking official to 18 years in prison. That's after he was charged with corruption. But some suspect the real reason behind his punishment is something entirely different.
China sentenced a former property tycoon who once called Communist Party leader Xi Jinping a clown to 18 years in prison. Ren Jiqiang was charged with corruption, bribery, misappropriation of public funds, and abuse of power by state-owned company personnel. That's according to a court statement released on Tuesday. Some critics called it an especially harsh sentence amid an ongoing clampdown on dissent. The communist regime has been known to use corruption and bribery charges to punish dissidents. Rumors have been circulating that when Ren's trial began on September 11th, he pled guilty to all charges. But according to Taiwan's central news agency, an insider says Rin refused to plead guilty to most charges. No media outlets were allowed to witness the trial. Only a few of Rin's relatives were granted permission to attend. As a result, Rin's real response is unclear. Rin is 69 years old and a former chairman of a state-owned real estate group. He's been nicknamed Cannon Rin for his outspoken views posted on social media. He was detained in March after referring to Xi as a clown stripped naked who insisted on continuing being emperor. Rin made the comment following a speech Xi made in February about the regime's efforts to combat the virus. One of his articles also criticized the Communist Party. He wrote, "The root cause of the problem is a ruling party that is not supervised by the people and goes unchecked by the law. The system only serves the leader's power and his core interests." Rin was later investigated for a serious disciplinary violation and expelled from the Communist Party. Rin's father was a former Chinese deputy minister of the country's Ministry of Commerce. Being the son of a high-ranking Communist Party official, harsh punishments for people like him are rare.
Last week, Chinese Communist Party leader Xi Jinping visited the hometown of communist dictator Mao Zedong. It marked his third visit to the site in the 8 years since he took power. During his trip, Xi told a group of primary students he met there that they should inherit and represent what he called the red gene, referring to the communist ideology. An analyst says that Xi's recent words and actions reminds many of Mao's rule and the time of China's Cultural Revolution. The decade-long political campaign started by Mao used China's radical youth to launch violence against China's intellectuals and upper-class society. It's estimated that up to 8 million people were killed in the campaign. Tens of millions were persecuted. Now we turn to Taiwan. On Tuesday, Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen visited an Air Force base and praised the heroic performance of pilots for intercepting Chinese jets approaching the island. She said Taiwan won't allow others to show off in its airspace. This was after Chinese fighter jets crossed the Taiwan Strait center line almost 40 times last week. The Taiwan Strait divides mainland China and the island. Crossing the center line is considered entering the other's airspace. When Taiwanese fighter jets intercepted the Chinese aircraft last week, a Chinese pilot responded with a provocative comment. He said there is no Taiwan Strait center line. This sentence was repeated on Monday by a Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman. Beijing claims the island as sovereign Chinese territory. Taiwan has not considered itself to be part of the regime for 70 years. On Monday, Taiwan warned the Chinese Communist regime that Taiwan's armed forces have the right to self-defense and had clear procedures for a first response following frequent harassment and threats. Previously, Taiwan's force had to wait for the Chinese army to open fire before it could counterattack. The new regulations suggest a lower threshold that permits Taiwan to open fire first. On Tuesday, Taiwan's foreign minister urged other countries to join its condemnation of China's threatening behavior.
We ask the international community to strongly condemn these statements and practices of China and ask the Chinese government to stop all these actions.
The European Union launched the first EU-Taiwan investment forum in Taipei on Tuesday. It signals Europe's warming economic relationship with the democratic island and growing skepticism with China.
Now it is up to us to take it forward.
The historic forum is organized by the European bloc's de facto embassy in Taiwan and involves 15 European countries, including Germany, France, the Netherlands, Italy, and Spain. Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen says a bilateral investment agreement, or BIA, will help build stronger economic ties, and Taiwan is ready to partner with the bloc in IT, biotech, and health sectors. The island is famous for its technology and semiconductor industries.
A BIA is the key to this success and will help us all thrive in the digital age.
The head of the European Economic and Trade Office says the pandemic has exposed the vulnerabilities of global supply chains, and Taiwan could be a great partner as the EU adapts to these challenges because it shares the same values of an open, transparent, and fair international trading system.
The European Union and Taiwan have unique possibilities to work together and embrace the new opportunities in this changing world. Old answers and business models will not any longer work in the future. We better change before we have to.
The European Union's more friendly posture toward Taiwan follows signals of a closer U.S.-Taiwan relationship. 2 high-level U.S. officials have visited the island in the past few weeks. Meanwhile, the EU has taken a stronger stance against China. In a recent summit, it called on China to open up markets and respect human rights. The EU was the 4th largest trade partner with Taiwan in 2019, and its trade with the island was about $24 billion in the first half of this year.
Now we take a look at a newly published video from China's military, but it seems to have taken a few cues from Hollywood in its production. China's Air Force released a video showing nuclear-capable H-6 bombers carrying out a simulated attack on what appears to be the U.S. Air Force base in Guam. The island would be a key base for the U.S. in responding to any conflict in the Asia-Pacific region, including Taiwan and the South China Sea. The video was released on Saturday on the Chinese military's, known as the People's Liberation Army or PLA, Air Force Weibo account. The move appears to be yet another expression of anger over a U.S. official Keith Cross' recent trip to Taiwan. But the 2-minute video looks more like the action movie trailer than a military display. Chinese netizens pointed out that it appears to include clips from 3 Hollywood movies. One part of the video shows a missile mid-flight. Here it's compared to a scene from the movie Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen. In another section, the PLA video shows an explosion, eerily similar to a clip from the film The Rock. Another section of the video depicts a blast at a military base. It's been compared to a shot from the movie The Hurt Locker. The UN is holding its 75th annual General Assembly today. President Trump started his speech by criticizing the Chinese Communist Party's mishandling of the virus and praising the U.S. response to it.
We will distribute a vaccine. We will defeat the virus. We will end the pandemic. And we will enter a new era of unprecedented prosperity, cooperation, and peace. As we pursue this bright future, we must hold accountable the nation which unleashed this plague onto the world, China. If the United Nations is to be an effective organization, it must focus on the real problems of the world. This includes terrorism, the oppression of women, forced labor, drug trafficking, human and sex trafficking, religious persecution, and the ethnic cleansing of religious minorities.
He also turned to the issue of environmentalism, calling out China for releasing more toxic mercury than any other country. Trump said those who claim to be concerned with protecting the environment but overlook this problem don't have pure intentions. The president also touted the 2 peace deals signed in the Middle East. He said more countries will come on board too. He told the other world leaders that these things were achieved by putting his own citizens first and rejecting the failed approaches of those who came before him.
A New York Police Department officer has been arrested on federal charges. Prosecutors say he acted as an illegal agent for the Chinese regime.
A criminal complaint says 33-year-old Bai Madajie Angwang fed intelligence about ethnic Tibetans and others in New York to the Chinese consulate. Angwang is a naturalized U.S. citizen from Tibet who first traveled here on a cultural exchange visa. He eventually got asylum, claiming he was arrested and tortured in China because he's Tibetan. According to the complaint, he considered himself an asset for Beijing and referred to an unnamed Chinese consular official as boss. The Chinese regime persecutes Tibetans in Tibet, in China, and when it can, overseas. The indictment says Angwang was to report Tibetans in the city who might oppose the Chinese regime. Besides being an NYPD officer, he's also a member of the U.S. Army Reserve, where he holds a secret-level security clearance. The NYPD's police commissioner says Ang Wan violated every oath he took in the U.S., and prosecutors say he failed to notify the U.S. Attorney General about his activities. Ang Wan was also charged with committing wire fraud, making false statements, and obstructing an official proceeding. He faces up to 55 years in prison if convicted of all charges.
The criminal complaint of the NYPD officer revealed another story. How, after NTD television approached him for an interview last year, he sought permission from his boss. Not the one at the NYPD, but at the Chinese consulate. NTD's Juliet Song reports.
Last November, a reporter from NTD's Chinese language team asked NYPD officer Baimadaji Ang Wang for a TV interview.
The interview was to focus on educating Chinese immigrants on preventing theft and also his experience working as an NYPD officer.
Ang Wang replied the next day, saying that he has to get permission from his boss first and would respond after that. Our reporter Lin says she had no idea that the boss Ang Wang referred to wasn't the one at the NYPD. According to recorded cell phone conversations detailed in Ang Wang's criminal complaint, the next day he went to ask for permission from one of his handlers at the Chinese consulate in New York. A handler is someone Ang Wang received tasks from and reported back to. They are officials working for the Chinese regime. He told the handler, "I don't dare to be too reckless with this matter, you know. With People's Daily, that's no problem. People's Daily is an official newspaper of the Chinese Communist Party." He was concerned about repercussions should he do the interview with the non-state-controlled media. In the end, Ang Wang's handler forbade him, saying, "Absolutely don't go on it." Ang Wang said he would think of a perfect excuse to turn down the interview. Ang Wang didn't respond to NTD for over 2 weeks until he met Lin at a press event.
He said he would have to get permission from the NYPD's headquarters, which would be rather troublesome. He turned down the interview in a rather subtle way, and I just said it's okay.
Lin was shocked to learn that Ang Wang was charged. He's the community affairs officer in Queens, a New York City borough, and Lin said he's very active in the local community. The complaint says Ang Wang has close ties with the Chinese regime, and that both of his parents are Communist Party members. His father, a retired member of Chinese military, and his mother, a retired government official, while his brother is currently working in the Chinese military. Juliet Song, NTD News.
Among the group of plaintiffs that challenged President Trump's executive order to ban WeChat, a lawyer was found to be from a law firm that has a good relationship with the Chinese Communist Party.
A California judge blocked President Trump's executive order to ban Chinese social media platform WeChat on Sunday, citing concerns over freedom of speech. The president says the app poses threats to America's national security and passes Americans' personal information to the Chinese regime. Clay Zhu, managing partner at Deheng Law Office's Silicon Valley office, is among the group of plaintiffs who challenged the president's order. The Beijing-based company was founded as a state-owned law firm under China's Justice Ministry. It's since changed over to a private partnership and is one of the biggest law firms in China. In 2013, the firm represented former Communist Party high-flyer Bo Xilai in his corruption trial, which was seen as the trial of the century in China. In 2010, Communist leader Xi Jinping, who was vice president at the time, visited the law firm and praised its good relationships with the Chinese regime's agencies. The firm now provides legal counsels for multiple departments of the Chinese regime, state-owned companies, as well as China's Belt and Road Project. According to Chinese media reports, the law firm's founding partner was once invited to participate in the secretive Beidaihe Conference, an informal closed-door meeting among communist leaders. It's allegedly held to set the tone for major national issues of the year. The Deheng lawyer filed a lawsuit against the WeChat ban through a nonprofit, the U.S. WeChat Users Alliance. In an open letter, the group called itself independent, adding that it does not represent WeChat, any political party, or government. The group says it has raised over $1 million from WeChat users to cover the attorney costs. Penny Zhou, NTD News.
Now we turn to Canada. According to Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister, François-Philippe Champagne, the country has abandoned free trade talks with China that were started 4 years ago. In an interview with newspaper Globe and Mail, he explained that a trade agreement between the two countries is no longer worth pursuing. Champagne also repeatedly accused Beijing for what he called its assertive, coercive diplomacy. He emphasized that Canada's first priority is to bring Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor back home from China. The Chinese regime charged the two Canadians with espionage back in June and has detained them ever since. Their arrest is largely thought to be retaliation after Canada took telecoms giant Huawei's chief financial officer into custody on a U.S. warrant in 2018. And that's all for today's China in Focus. Thanks for watching and see you tomorrow.